Emergency podcast. The Marlins trade for a closer. The Marlins have traded for David Robertson from the Mets, sending two young studs back to the Mets. It's a rental, but it is a big need, and Kim goes and gets the best closer available. This is Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England. Welcome to Locked On Marlins. This is your daily Marlins podcast. I'm your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up at Miami Marlins _UK. If you are listening to the pod, firstly, good morning. Good morning. Secondly, hit subscribe and leave a review. This, of course, is your team every day, and this is the Friday episode, and it is the earliest of early episodes. Woke up, realized the news, phone was blowing up. Had to fire up a pod immediately. For those wondering, yes, there is a YouTube channel. It is called Locked On Marlins. Head on over to there. Hit subscribe. Also, no guest. Too early for guests. Or too late. Maybe. Maybe this is still okay time-wise for the West Coast dogs. I don't know. But I fear my East Coast guys. The only ones up right now are the guys drinking, I think, probably. So those weren't available for guest appearances. Nevertheless, guys, emergency pod. This isn't just territory. This is emergency pod. Definitely. No doubt about it. The Marlins acquired David Robertson from the Mets, sending back Vargas and Hernandez, two complex guys, two highly touted complex guys too. You know, there's a particularly Vargas. A lot of people really liked him. He was really performing well. Looked to be performing above the age as well, I'd say. So, nevertheless, the Marlins, they get a deal done with the Mets. So in the division, also the Mets, they must be selling now, right? So the Mets waving the white flag on the 2023 season after starting the year with the most expensive roster ever assembled. Boy, oh boy, money cannot buy happiness for the Mets. That is for sure. But for the Marlins, let's just start with the need here. Why have they done this deal? They've done this deal because there was a huge need for a righty reliever in leverage innings. Dylan Floro already traded, already gone. The Marlins have gone bang, bang. 2 trades, 2 days, 2.5 days, depending on which day you look at here. But 2 trades for 2 righty relievers, Dylan Floro out, but the Marlins still had a need to go and get a leverage righty arm, and they get it done. For many, David Robertson is the best reliever available on the market, particularly rental, right? This is a pure rental, couple of months worth of David Robertson. The Marlins will pay the rest of his salary. He was earning $10 million in total this year. So, you know, a couple of $1 million of salary that the Marlins will take on there, 3-4 million, whatever's left. So Bruce Sherman did say, we will take on money, we will spend. We have money and we will spend it, as Bruce Sherman would say, and he is spending it. But the Marlins, they needed this. We've seen the pen recently where it's all lefty relievers in that leverage spot. It's crying out for a leverage righty arm, and Robertson absolutely fits that profile. This year, ERA for Robertson, 2.05 in 44 innings of work. He's had 14 saves in 17 attempts. So 3 blowies there for Robertson as well, but 14 saves, 2 ERA. This is a dependable dude in those leverage innings at the back end of games, as we've seen all year long. The Marlins will be playing close game after close game after close game. 1-run dubs galore, a couple of 1-run losses sprinkled in there recently. And that is exactly the reason why Kim Ang had to go and address the bullpen at the back end and go and get an elite guy. The Marlins, I would say, have typically shopped from a trade perspective in maybe buy low candidates or guys that they may be able to fix maybe in the future. They've got multiple years of control. This is not that. The Marlins are buying high on a proven guy that they absolutely needed. And this is a pure and simple signal to the rest of the league and the Marlins fan base and all the podcast hosts that the Marlins are all in 2023. Let me just round this up here. The Marlins, this will not be, and Kim, this will not be her last deal before the deadline. They've made 2 deals right now, and it will still not be the last. There will be more deals. We have money and we will spend it. We have trade capital and we will spend it. Where they go next is going to be really intriguing. But for me, they've got some business done early. And listen, the Mets, this is the first move the Mets have made. Of the Marlins, has Kim maybe jumped the market here? You know, I guess not. Like, people would have been talking to the Mets. It's clear they were kind of struggling as the years gone on. But to go and get, you know, the first piece from the Mets a few days in advance of the deadline, and actually in advance of a big series. I mean, every series is big for the Marlins now. But Robertson will join the roster. He'll slot in. And the Marlins now have the ability to go and mix and match a little bit. I've spoken for the last couple of couple of weeks, just how with their lack of trust in Dylan Floro, the fact that they've moved away from Floro in leverage, they've ended up with an all-lefty bullpen, leverage bullpen. And for me, it feels like you need to have that trust in at least one guy, maybe 2 guys now, with Jorge Lopez added also. You know, there's 2 guys there that can get outs, get big outs in big spots. I think the Marlins still like JT Chargois also. He's kind of struggled a touch as well, but that's relievers, right? It fluctuates through the year. So I do think now with Chargois, with Lopez, not Pablo, but with Lopez and also with Robertson, the Marlins have arms there, righty arms that can get big outs. Dylan Floro's gone. Matt Barnes to the IL. And that's part of the corresponding move here. So just to kind of talk about that briefly, you know, how do the Marlins get David Robertson onto the roster? Obviously, the 2 guys going in exchange, neither of them on the 40-man, being very, very young. So the corresponding move, I believe, for the 40-man is Matt Barnes to the 60-day IL. His season is over with surgery already. So Matt Barnes' season over. Easy to get him on. Whose spot does he take on the 26-man? I think that is an interesting one. There's one option that links to a topic we spoke about earlier in the week, and the Everydayers will know this. Talking about Eddie Cabrera. Blister issues again. Is this an IL stint for Eddie Cabrera? Does he need some time to recover? Does the fingers need time to recover? If not, and it's all go, then the only other candidate, in my opinion anyway, at this point, is Brian Hoeing. Other than that, I'd say, you know, George Soriano has pitched so well and has been immense in that long man role. I would say Brian Hoeing at this point is probably the odd man out, unless there's any injuries for any of the other guys that they need to work with. But I think the likely corresponding move in advance of today's game 1 against the Tigers, will be Brian Hoeing optioned, David Robertson added to the roster. And I think we see David Robertson pitching in 2 of 3 games here against the Tigers. The Marlins, I think, will look to put their best foot forward here in advance of the deadline for sure. And I think, as always, there's going to be some close games. So I think we get to see David Robertson early and plenty, I guess. So, yeah, big move here. The Marlins making and showing that signal of intent that they are buyers right now. This isn't the only move. It can't be the only move they make. They've been heavily linked to a ton of hitters. Gleyber Torres, Cody Bellinger, Tim Anderson. The Marlins are clearly looking to add a stick also. And they clearly need to add a starting pitcher. So when all said and done, the Marlins, I think, are going to swing a deal for a stick and an impact stick and someone that you look and go, they could be a difference maker. I think they're also going to acquire a starting pitcher. Maybe not the sexiest of names. Maybe they do. Who knows? But there will be someone that's relatively dependable that can deliver innings whilst they consider how they can work Trevor Rogers and Yuri Perez back into the rotation. They need that backup plan quick, I would say. Eddie Cabrera, obviously, with the blisters. Johnny Cueto, we saw what we saw in AAA. We saw what we saw in his first start back. The two didn't look alike. The results certainly didn't look alike, but they have to have a backup plan, I think, for Johnny Cueto if things go sideways, or anyone else for that matter. I want to talk about just more generally the guys that have gone the other way to the Mets. I want to talk about the Mets in general also and what this means for the Marlins. Equally, maybe one or two of the names for the Marlins to be considering from a stick and a starting pitcher perspective. But before we do that, this episode is brought to you by our good friends over at eBay Motors. Yes, sir. They've got the teal graphics as well for eBay Motors, which I love to see. But for a championship team, and listen, who knows, the Marlins could well be a championship team. They are making championship moves right now. It's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage or Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit. Or your money back, because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. All right, guys, joining me here, Peter Pratt, on Locked on Marlins, emergency podcast version of Locked on Marlins, as the Marlins drop an overnight deal or an early morning deal, depending on your time zone, to acquire David Robertson from the New York Mets, heading the other way. Vargas and Hernandez, both from the complex league. Young guys, projectable guys, but those guys nowhere near the major league roster at this point. Nowhere near the roster. The Marlins are all in, and they have to make these deals to address needs. David Robertson, the best, at least, rental reliever out there, in my opinion. The Marlins have gone and got that dude and added him to the major league roster in a year when the Marlins are pushing for the postseason. This deal, it had to be done. These young studs, they have to be moved in this type of year. It could look bad. It could look bad in a few years' time if Vargas or Hernandez turn out to be absolute studs. Who knows? Right now, they're trending in the right direction. I went and looked at Alex Carver's page. That's the point, right? You go and you check out Alex Carver's page, work out what's his view. What's his view on the deals, on the return? And his view, I think the sentence that I took away was, the Marlins have given up a ton, because these dudes have been way overperforming, and they're overperforming. But it doesn't matter. Frankly, I don't care. These are the deals that just have to be made at this moment in time. These guys are so far away, and unfortunately, they have to be sacrificed. They have to. And more of them could be sacrificed in the next couple of days. Alex Carver could be in shambles by the end of this deadline, because the Marlins, they haven't been true buyers in a 162 season for, I don't know when. I don't think I've been a fan at any point. They were buyers in 2020, for sure, acquiring Starling Marte in what was a slam dunk deal overall. But the Marlins haven't been buyers in a 162 season for a very, very long time. The top end of the system in some ways has got some question marks around it. But I still think a few of those guys will be traded in the next couple of days also. So the farm is going to be depleted here. But as a fan base and as an organization, they have to, they want to fix the attendance. And the way to fix the attendance more generally is to sell season tickets. The way to sell season tickets more generally is to have a winning or postseason relevant club. You have excitement, You have fans that want to come. You have fans that want to commit and buy season tickets. That is what the Marlins, from an organization perspective and a kind of commercial strategic perspective, they need. It's essential. You can't just rely on game day tickets on StubHub for $5 a go to solve your attendance issues. The Marlins just have to be good. They have to make it to the postseason. And I think David Robertson gives them a much better opportunity right now to make the postseason. They've added 2 righty relievers here, and they were necessary. The next question is, which starting pitcher? We've heard nothing in terms of connections for the Marlins and starters. Nothing at all. I did an episode just before the game started up again, while the All-Star break was happening. Names that the Marlins could and should add immediately. Unfortunately, since the Marlins didn't add a name, but I was talking about Lance Lynn, I was talking about Michael Lorenzen, I was talking about Yarbrough. Tons of names out there. There's other guys that of higher quality. Jack Flaherty, those kind of guys. Marcus Stroman, those kind of guys. Based on the prices here, those are going to be farm busters as well for rentals. We saw it just with the Angels going and getting Giolito. The price tag for these starters, particularly the higher echelon ones, is going to be extreme. Really is. I just wanted to touch on one other name because we've heard Tim Anderson, we've heard Cody Bellinger. We've heard these names knocking around. They're names that I think many clubs will be looking at. One other name that I do think is interesting, Aram Layton, the former host of Locked On Marlins, the OG, the GOAT, is talking pretty heavily about Tommy Edman. And we know Aram's got history with predicting Marlins deals that maybe you don't quite see coming. With Tommy Edman, I would say it fits the profile in many ways for the Marlins, where it isn't just a win-now move. It will give them something into next year, which they need. Joey Wendell expiring deal. You've got the versatility with Tommy Edman also to play center field. I completely understand where Aram's going with the Tommy Edman situation. The Cardinals and the Marlins fit perfectly because the Cardinals need pitching. The Marlins have a ton of organizational pitching and major league ready pitching. However, some of that pitching right now is hurt. And for a club that is trying to contend right now, that takes out of the equation a Max Meyer. Maybe it does take out the equation a Dax Fulton. It takes out the equation a Trevor Rogers, perhaps. But for a team that is maybe selling and retooling for next year, they are seeking arms with multiple years of major league control also. So I can absolutely see a deal happening with the Cardinals for Tommy Edman and at least one of the stud top of the rotation, but top of the organization arms headed to St. Louis as part of a deal. I thought the Max Meyer made a ton of sense, but there's other guys out there too. Jake Eder's the buzzy name right now, for rightly so. Max Meyer was the buzzy name last year and the year before, rightly so. Trevor Rogers was the buzzy name at the deadline last year too. Craig Mish reporting a lot of teams in on Trevor Rogers. Do the Marlins want to move on from Rogers? Maybe. Maybe they do. Maybe they look at this and think, do you know what? We're happy to move Trevor Rogers and get Tommy Edman. We think we can piece it together in the rotation this year. We've got Yuri Perez that could come back. We maybe trade for someone. It makes sense. Braxton Garrett has emerged, but kind of started to struggle a touch in recent outings anyway. But he's emerged. So I definitely think that's one to watch. I think the Cardinals and Marlins just generally are one to watch. In summary here for this one, guys, emergency pod, the Marlins, they make the move and they go and get the best righty closer available out there. It's an all-in move, but also the timing is interesting. And if Kim Ang, if she had a Twitter account, right now she'd be firing it up and she'd be just tweeting out a few simple words saying, "We're not done." That's what she'd be saying right now if she had a Twitter account. And actually, because she doesn't, I'm going to tweet that out for her. But the Marlins are not done. They're going to go and get a stick, and they're going to go and get a starter. And that will be 4 moves at the deadline, making this club better for 2023. You can't ask any more from Kim Ang and the Marlins at this point. There is no guarantee they make the postseason, but they are giving themselves every single opportunity to get there for the first time in a 1-6-2 for many, many years. Big deal for the Marlins. This one may look a poor deal in the future, but if the Marlins make the postseason with David Robertson helping them along the way, that would be irrespective of what happens with Vargas or Hernandez. It doesn't matter. This deal is a win-now deal, and Vargas and Hernandez could not help right now. It is what it is, and I like the fact that they're trading away from the really far-away dudes at this point to go and get major league talent, elite level, definitely above average level major league talent. Guys, thanks for joining me on Locked On Marlins on a Friday morning, an emergency podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day, guys. Effectively, Locked On Marlins will be here all through the weekend when news drops, and I expect news to drop. We will be here with emergency podcasts galore. I think there'll be at least 2 of them, and we'll look forward to seeing you then.